Good morning. I'm Councilwoman Thelda Williams, Chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee. I am joined by Councilwoman Pastor and Councilman Valenzuela. First item, minutes of the previous meeting.
Move the minutes of the previous meeting.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Item 2 is a consent item. Does anyone have any questions? Motion?
Move approval of item 2?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. 3 through 9 are informational. Does anyone need more information, would like to have a report?
Can we, I was going to look at item 5.
Do you want a presentation?
I can, no, I don't need a presentation right now.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Anyone else? Okay. Then we will go to item 10, Regional Transit All-Day Pass. Maria, I think this is yours.
Madam Chair, members of the commission. Actually, I think we're 3/4 of your agenda today between transit, so thank you very much. When we provided an update on our Transportation 2050 and the progress we were making, a couple of the items that we'll talk about further today in different items, one of the things that has been continuing to come up, and is something that was discussed especially by our Citizens Transportation Commission Chair, Congressman Pastor, talking about the differential that we charge when you purchase your bus pass on the bus. And so Deputy Director Ken Kessler will talk further about this differential and recommend a change to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. As Maria mentioned, I'm going to talk about the pricing of the all-day pass specifically and the differential for purchasing that pass on the bus versus off the bus. So first of all, just to give a little bit of background, I just want to reiterate that transit fares are regional. It's not just a City of Phoenix specific item, but they are set by the Valley Metro boards, both RPTA and Valley Metro Rail, as well as there's a city ordinance that establishes those fares within the City of Phoenix. So the City Council of Phoenix would need to also weigh in, as well as the Valley Metro boards. And given some background and some history, in 2007 we implemented our current fare collection system, and as part of that new fare collection system, we eliminated the bus transfers. Previously we had the little paper tickets that operators would tear off and give to folks that needed to transfer when they paid their fare. And with the new fare collection system was the introduction for the first time in the Valley of the all-day pass. And not only was the all-day pass new, but it was also made available for purchase on board the bus through the fare box, and so that was new for our region. A couple of things that became evident there was that a lot of people were buying their pass on the bus, and it kind of had an impact on our operations. It slowed things down because the time it took for the fare box to accept the cash, dispense the pass itself. So in 2009, there was an overall fare policy change in the region, and as part of that fare policy change was the introduction of an additional charge on the purchase of the onboard pass versus the offboard. That was implemented to provide incentive for folks to buy their passes off the bus. And part of what made that possible was making passes more widely available. Before the new fare collection system, we had a very small retail outlet program and some other programs that sold passes because we had limited passes. The new fare collection system introduced a number of additional passes. So with that, we currently have a number of ways our riders can get their transit passes. Retail outlets, transit centers, there's 5 transit centers in the Valley, 4 of them are in Phoenix, and there's 1 in the city of Tempe. There's additionally some other outlets, private sales outlets, which are basically employers that buy passes and either sell them or give them to their employees, as well as some social service and human services agencies that buy passes and give them to their clients for their use. There's also online orders that became available in 2006-07 on Valley Metro's website. They introduced buying passes online back in 2006-07. As well with the introduction of the light rail system in 2008, ticket vending machines also are available out there to buy all the different pass types, and there's about 120 plus of those TVMs currently out there on the light rail system. And then lastly, the all-day passes specifically are available for purchase on board the bus at the fare boxes, and there's about 800 to 900 buses throughout the region where folks can purchase those passes. So just a little history on that jumped on me. On the retail outlets and online orders, you can see there that back in 06-07, about the time we're implementing the fare collection system, we only had about 100 retail outlets generating about $2 million a year. Currently, there's about 800 retail outlets that generate about nearly $20 million a year in fare revenue. So we've seen quite a growth in the retail outlet program. As well with our online order program, although it's not nearly as big as the retail outlets, it has nearly doubled since it was implemented in 06-07 to nearly $600,000 last fiscal year. And as I mentioned, the introduction of TVMs happened in December of 2008 when light rail commenced operations. And so I just wanted to touch briefly on some of the effects of the pricing differential for the onboard versus offboard purchase of the all-day pass. It's an additional $2 per pass for full fare, $1 for reduced fare. And what we've seen over the years is a reduction in the cash collected on the buses. Back in 2006-07, we had over half of the fare revenues that were collected were actually cashed through the fare box. In the last fiscal year, that's down to 22% cash versus all the other ways we collect our fare revenue. And for the $2 and $1 for reduced differential, that results in about $500,000 in annual additional revenue for the region. And just to put that in a little bit of context, the bus and light rail fare revenue for the system each year is about $60 million. So it's a little less than 1% of the overall revenue. But as Maria mentioned, we've had a lot of feedback on the inconvenience and some of the folks that are impacted by not being able to buy a pass on board the bus for the same price you can get it at a Circle K or a Fry's, for example. So with that, staff has evaluated this and taken the position that we'd like to see the differential eliminated. And so here's the recommendation. It's going real quick today. Here's the recommendation before you. Staff is recommending that the subcommittee recommend the full city council to approve reducing the price of the onboard purchase to match the offboard purchase price of the all-day pass, as well as take a position to recommend to RPTA and Valley Metro Rail that they implement this regionally. And to clarify, we're not seeking to change the city ordinance right now because we want to keep it consistent with the regional fare policy over at Valley Metro. We'll go to city council at a later date to specifically make that change to the fare ordinance. Right now, we're looking for city council to approve taking that position so that we can work with our regional partners to make that happen at a regional level. We've started the discussion several months ago, so our Valley Metro and our regional partners are aware that the city is taking this position, and we just want to work through the Valley Metro Regional Fare Policy Working Group to get consensus on this item.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, just a couple of things to add to this. The Citizens Transportation Commission did take a position recommending to you that this differential be changed. Also, one of the things that we need to look at long-term, as Ken mentioned, we have discussed this at the regional level with our member cities. One of the things that we're going to be talking about with these trade-offs, this is $500,000 cash that we do receive on board based on the differential. Although as staff, I personally don't believe that this is the right thing to do. I think we should eliminate this. We're also looking at other things that will impact our fares and our revenues. One of the things is eliminating several of the holidays. So the region is going to need to weigh in on both of these items and how to balance out a loss in revenue, or a reduction in revenue, I should say, as well as an increase in costs with providing full service on those holidays. again, it's trade-offs with trying to make sure that both of them balance out, even though both of them are right things in the long run for the region to be able to do. So today, as Ken mentioned, we're asking for your recommendation to the full council to take a position on this, and we are fully committed on taking this to the region for eliminating the differential.
Questions? Councilwoman?
I don't necessarily have questions. My understanding, and I'm just going to go through the PowerPoint real fast. My understanding is that the transit centers and other offsites, but mainly the transit centers, where bus riders can go and purchase a pass. And I'm going to make up a number. They can purchase the pass for $1. If the transit center was closed, or if it was a holiday or whatever reason, I wasn't able to make it in between that time, then I was charged an additional, say, $2. So the pass ended up being $3 if I got onto the bus and needed to purchase a pass. Am I correct?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, yeah, you're hypothetically correct, just the numbers are
Well, the numbers aren't right. So for the audience, the numbers aren't right. I should have gone 25 cents and,
And that's part
50
of
cents.
our, yeah, and that's part of why we're
They would know.
looking at changing this, because transit centers do have limited hours. Even retail outlets, some of the places, they're not always open and so forth. And so, as Maria had mentioned, we've been hearing a lot of feedback over probably the last year. And specifically as we went through the process with the original Citizens Committee to develop the T2050 plan, this came up over and over. So it's kind of a common theme. And so it's time to address it. And there are concerns about what this may do to operations, but we think our passengers kind of have their habits down and so forth, so we don't expect there's going to be a bunch of people flocking back to buying on the bus and slowing operations down. It's just for those people who don't really have the ability to, walk a half a mile to Circle K or whatever. This gives them the option to buy the pass at the same price. And we're also hopeful that we'll see maybe some additional riders who couldn't afford the $6 now can afford the $4, and maybe not necessarily the $500,000 in additional revenue that this generates. Not necessarily all of that would be lost, and so we're hopeful the impact is minimal, as well as making it a lot more convenient for our customers.
I think where that slows the operation down, at least back in my day, where it slowed the operation down was getting change. So it won't, it'll be $2 or whatever it is.
There's no change.
There will be no change,
yeah,
because that's
correct.
where, back in my day, that's what slowed it down. We would give us
Now
$2 and it was,
That far
Now it's the
back?
rumpled
Yeah,
dollar
that's
bill
fine.
that doesn't go through the reader.
right. And so, yeah. Okay, well, I think this is great for our writers, so.
Vice Mayor?
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for taking a look at it. This is certainly something we've heard from the public that there's a real interest in, so appreciate that. On my personal list, we've had a couple items that were higher, and you mentioned holiday ridership particularly, and I think some of the Monday holidays where there's a lot of people who still have to work, and we have seen very, very crowded bus and rail on those days. And obviously, I'm still very interested in what we can do for our veterans on transportation. But from my perspective, I think this does make sense, in part because just looking at the trend line with how few people are paying cash, I suspect that will continue. You've shared information with us that smartphones are actually fairly common among the population we served. And even though Councilman Bill Gates is not with us here today, if he were, he would mention that he would love to see more ability to pay with a phone on the system. And I think that's something we continue to work at and see. I think that is another tool that will decrease the amount of cash payment, and we'll see that trend continue. And that's something I think my colleagues and I are all still supportive, making it as easy as possible to pay, giving our riders as many possible options. I also think this will be very helpful as we have more and more tourists riding our system, and they wouldn't probably likely know about differentials, and it's one fewer thing that we can get confused or have to explain. So good news from an economic development perspective as well. So I could make a motion unless my colleagues wanted to.
Go ahead.
Move approval of staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I will tell you that every Metro meeting, the speakers talk about this. So I know you are going to make Blue and the others very, very happy. And I'm sure they'll find something else to discuss, but I think this is a long time coming, and we have a lot of exciting changes on the horizon that will make the vice mayor very happy, so. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I think you're the next one, too?
I am. And this time I'm bringing up Deputy Director Jesus Sapien to assist. We came back to you, I think it was last fall, to request approval to issue a request for proposals for a new CAD AVL system. And Jesus will go over what CAD AVL stands for up there. But it sounds very technical. It's extremely important to what we do, from being able to know where all of our buses are, especially in a day like yesterday. And I'll share that with you. We had a bus driver who was accosted by a person with a knife, who then took the bus, thank God there was no passengers on that bus, and drove that bus out to 115th Avenue and Grand. And thank goodness that, again, no passengers, that our operator was not hurt during this, but it was police that had to get involved to bring that bus, the person out of the bus. So having the ability to know where our buses are, to be able to have our operators be able to speak with our operations and control center, make sure that we've got that communication with police, as well as the other advantages that this system will bring to us is extremely important. Our system is outdated. It's beyond its life cycle, and we're very pleased with what our proposer has brought forward, and Jesus will walk you through that.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Hopefully purchasing this system will also make Blue happy. We'll see. Thank you for having us here today. CAD AVL is computer-aided dispatch and automatic vehicle locator. So what that is basically knowing where the vehicles are at any given time, having the back and forth communication with the operators to our operations control system, of which there are many in the city. Phoenix operates the main one. And also basically making sure that the system is operating as it should so that we can make sure that our contractors are carrying out the service efficiently. So as you can see, here's a couple pictures of some of the current onboard equipment. We have many antennas, many GPS transponders. We have a lot of onboard texts that go back and forth between the operations control centers and the operators. And the way I explain it to visitors to our OCC is basically the OCC acts as a control tower, just like at an airport. Whenever a vehicle goes into service, that operator is driving the vehicle, and the operations control center is managing that vehicle while it's in service. We can see where it is. We can give them updates. We can tell them about special events where they have to take a detour, wrecks, bad traffic, whatever it might be. We can send those communications back and forth to the operators, and they in turn use that information to reroute or speed up or slow down or whatever it might be. But it's become very important because as our system grows and we integrate more with rail, we've had issues such as bus bridging. Whenever the light rail experiences a downtime, whether that be because of an accident or bad weather or power outage, bus is called upon to fill that void. So our CAD AVL system performs many functions. The main two, in my opinion, is schedule adherence, making sure those buses are hitting the published schedule for the passengers when they're supposed to be, and managing our contractors. As you know, our transit service is contracted out, and this is a way of us making sure that our contractors are carrying out the service according to the published schedule, according to the contractual provisions. So we have a lot of onboard equipment, a lot of people in our OCC talking to those operators, providing guidance, and a lot of things such as Maria mentioned the incident yesterday, light rail, bus bridging, emergency management, calls for service, things like that. This has been approximately a 2-year process. And what we did first was that we worked with a consultant to kind of gauge the transit industry and see what's the next best thing for having onboard systems like the newer CAD AVL. As Maria said, our current system has been in place since 2002. It has exceeded its programmed life, so we're looking to upgrade it. So we worked with a consultant to see what should we do next and what's available. And so we did put together an RFP. We worked as a region. That's very important because, as you know, we have worked more and more with the region as we become more multimodal, as the valley grows, as we see more people making connections between different modes. We put this RFP out as a region, both in development and evaluation of the RFP. So some of the new things that we wanted to see was live data. And that's key because today we can tell customers when the schedule says a vehicle is supposed to get to their given bus stop. What we want to do is go the next step, which some agencies have done. We want to have a mobile router on every bus so that we have live data. So that if I go out and catch my bus today at Central and Van Buren, if I have an app, if I look at Google Maps, if I look at the Valley Metro website, instead of telling me here's when the next bus is supposed to be there according to the schedule, this new system will tell us here's how far away it is in distance and time. So that's a huge advancement for our passengers.
So I can just emphasize on that. We have open data. In fact, I think we were the first one within the city to provide open data, and it is that real-time information. However, what we've heard from our app developers is because our system is very old, it doesn't release that information. It doesn't ping it as frequently as their apps would like to provide that information. On the train, it's fast because they have a different system today than we do. But on the buses, ours is old and doesn't real-time that information fast enough. With this, we'll be able to make any app developer happy, I think, with our data because it will provide it much faster and more frequent so that they can rely on that real time, which means then our passengers who are looking at their different apps can get that information and know I can stay a little bit longer or, gosh, I do need to rush to get to that bus or that train.
The other thing that we're looking for in a new system is redundancy. Right now we have the radio that provides voice and data back and forth between the buses and the systems. However, that system goes down if we have, what we call dark spots in the area where the mountaintop antennas don't hit, or if we have an outage of some sort of those antennas, as we have over the past few years. We don't have a backup system. With that onboard mobile router, we will have that backup system so that if one or the other goes out, we still have a way to communicate with the operators in times of emergencies and a way to manage the service. The other thing that we're looking for is engine performance reporting. This will be key because the new CAD-AVL system will tie into the engine. You can kind of think of it as OnStar for buses, I would say. What happens today is if an operator calls into the OCC and says, I hear a funny noise, the brakes are squealing, I get a high temperature reading, something like that, we literally have to have someone go out there and look at that bus and see, does it need to be taken back to the garage? Can it keep going? With engine performance reporting, we'll be able to do that remotely, and we'll be able to see the diagnostics of the system and tell the operator you need to pull over right away, or it's safe, keep going, it's a minor issue. So that's going to be very important. And it will also automate some of our FTA reporting in terms of passenger measuring. So we have the evaluation criteria up here, and we had various areas that the evaluation committee looked at. And here are the results. Based on the base system, which is what will be necessary to buy for the region, and that's approximately 1,000 vehicles in the region, the committee recommended Clever Devices, who has worked with similar-sized transit agencies and cities across the nation. The pricing was close, but in terms of what they were offering, new features, advanced features, application integration, things like that, Clever Devices scored a little higher in a couple areas, and that's why they were recommended for award. In terms of the overall financial impact of awarding this contract, we're looking at $32 million. The key thing with that is that it is for 1,000 vehicles. This is not just Phoenix. This is every bus in the region that operates as part of the Valley Metro system, including Phoenix's Dial-A-Ride vehicles, which are approximately 125. So this is a regional effort that we're moving forward with. The other key is that some of these components are optional. So the $32 million is a maximum amount that we're looking for. And the reason is because once we start getting into the evaluation of each bus, two things will happen. Number one, we'll look at buses that are just a few years away from retirement, and we probably won't upgrade that equipment. It doesn't make sense. The other thing is we're going to look at reusing some of the equipment. If we can go into the buses and you reuse some of the wiring and cabling and not have to go and sink in a lot of money to replace absolutely everything, we will do that. And luckily, we have staff on hand that are city staff that will look at each bus and make those decisions and say, on this particular bus, it's too old, we shouldn't replace everything, or here's some equipment that we can reuse because it's still usable. And we will do that for every one of the 1,000 buses that we're looking to upgrade. The other thing that's key in terms of financial impact is that we're leveraging funds. These are not Proposition 104 funds that we'll be using. These are majority federal, approximately 85%, and the other 15% will be regional funds. As you may recall, during the Proposition 104 outreach, we told the public, we told the voters, that was part of our message, that we would do our best to leverage any available other funding source that we could. And this is a perfect example of that. We're going to use capital funds available to us from federal and regional sources to the maximum amount possible. And that's the funding source for this, the life of this program. So what we're looking to today is a recommendation from the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee to recommend City Council approval to award the Regional Computer-Aided Dispatch Automatic Vehicle Locator contract to Clever Devices. And with that, we will be happy to answer any questions.
Vice Mayor?
I just wanted to add, you know me, I always have to add something at the end, so I apologize. We mentioned that this is regional. Our staff maintains the equipment though. So you will see things run through for a city. We maintain the software, we house it, we provide it for the region. We maintain all of the mountaintops and all of that equipment. So you will continue to see those things run through from us, even though the vast majority of this is federally funded. And then Proposition $400, which is the regional tax dollars, will be brought in from the other cities for their fair share. But I did want to emphasize that.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for continuing your leadership on open data. I think it will be exciting to have even better data. I personally hope to use the function leave now to catch your bus on time, which some other cities have offered, and I think, at least as far as I know, we don't have apps in our market that tell you you need to leave now to catch the bus, but I'm very gifted in arriving just as it pulls away, and so I am hopeful that many others like me will benefit from this investment in technology, and I think both our partners on apps and then the private developers will enjoy using this data. So I hope when it's in place, we can make a robust effort to let people know that we have that better data, because we've certainly gotten requests in the past. So very exciting. Have we gotten any feedback that the council should be aware of from our private sector partners or their employees about this?
No, this has been basically, this is kind of one of those things that happens behind the scene. So we put out the RFP, but we haven't really gotten any huge public feedback from any parties that you mentioned. This is just one of those pieces of software that's going to reside in our building. It's going to operate regionally, and we will work with our regional partners, because this will be their vehicles having it installed too. And then once it's up and running, being used to monitor their service. But to your question, no, we haven't received anything.
So the operators
Our
are
service
comfortable.
providers have been on board and part of this process throughout. So they are very actually excited by this.
Yes.
And then this subcommittee has heard from individuals who use Dial-A-Ride who would love to see more efficient route mapping. So this might help us with those with those decisions as well.
Yes, by having that additional data with knowing where the vehicle is, it'll be able to work better with the software in being able to route better.
And our Dial-A-Ride provider mentioned that they have an ability to do more efficient route mapping, and this is compliant with the solution that they have, so that it'll all work together?
The way I would characterize it is that it's all going to dovetail together. So yes, the data will talk to each other behind the scenes. The idea is, the long-term idea, and we've worked very closely with Valley Metro's IT staff, the idea is to have one platform for the customer. So regardless of the fact that wherever the data might be coming from the CAT AVL, from Dial-A-Ride, from other potential services that we might do in the future, that the service delivery to the passenger would be in one platform, so that they can look at where they are, where they need to go, and look at those several options instead of just bus and or light rail. It would be all the available options of transportation.
So since our chief sustainability officer is here, this might save us miles driven on our Dial-A-Ride vehicles if they can more efficiently map out. So more greenhouse gas savings as well to build on our city's record. Thank you.
Question?
No, just a comment. I'm also very excited about just the level of customer service that we're going to be able to provide now and in the future for our customers. But you started your presentation by mentioning this, Maria. The public safety component cannot be underestimated or shouldn't be, or it can't be underscored enough, which also ties in with the customer service. You know, we don't know when things like that could possibly happen, and we don't know if, you know, you mentioned a bus where no passengers were on. It could have very well been a bus with lots of passengers on. So the customer service component is incredibly important. The public safety component is incredibly important, and I'm glad to see that we're moving in this direction. Thank you.
I have, I'm just curious, because as we purchase new software, we purchase it today and tomorrow it's outdated. So my question is, across our region, will this software be able to communicate with each other's different, I don't know, systems, I guess I'll call them, computer systems? Because as we've moved forward within our own city, we have discovered that our systems don't even talk to one another. And as Councilman Valenzuela mentioned, public safety, I think that's critical with this app, that a piece of public safety is tied into it, just in case something is happening live or there's an emergency, and they're able to then be able to track it on their system. And so that's just it's just kind of like a comment of, okay, let's be smart about this. I know we are, but even in being smart and planning, something new comes up. So it's just one of those things. I'm hoping the software, the system's open enough to adapt to whatever the future brings us in technology.
So, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, that's what you're talking about is exactly what we're working towards. So the system that we have today, which we call Vehicle Management System, VMS, does that now. So what that means is that you can come into the City of Phoenix's Operations Control Center, and we can see all the buses in the region, regardless of it's, you know, from the Tempe garage or the Mesa garage or our West garage. We can see all the vehicles on one screen. So we will continue that with this system. To your specific comment, though, this is a 16-year commitment. We're buying 10 years of the base agreement, and then we have 6 years optional at the end. So if we fully commit to this contract with Clever Devices, we have a maximum of 16 years, which is about what one of these systems should last you, you know, a little longer than the life of a bus, which is 12 years. So that's what we would do. We would continue that methodology, whereby we would have one system that manages all the buses in the region that operate under the Valley Metro brand. And that'll be for communication and for data, so it's both.
And the beauty of working regionally is so we don't have one operator or one city buying something that then doesn't work with the others. We've seen that in the past, but that is one of our very top priorities, and it is a consistent priority amongst the region to work together to leverage our resources versus working against each other and spending more money. It's an excellent point.
So, Madam Chair, this is a very exciting news. We've learned from our past. I would like to make a motion to move it forward.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and I know you've been at this a long time. Good work, and I appreciate all your efforts. Something we've wanted for a long time, and we're almost there. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
I'm going to say, let's take item 13 out of order, and since you are right there.
Right.
All right. So what I wanted to do was also mention some really good news that we got this morning. Vice Mayor seems to already know the good news, which is great. And it ties right into our Transportation 2050. So as part of Transportation 2050, we committed to quite a few things. We're going to talk about the bus side of it today, but we received news that we received a $2 million grant from the FTA for transit-oriented development. We'll be using those funds for our South Central light rail extension, and it's really to work with the businesses well in advance of construction to help them be as strong as possible and to be coordinated before construction begins as part of our Transportation 2050 priorities. We also heard that the acting secretary of FTA mentioned our project specifically and said we were doing great things. So very good news that I wanted to share before we talk about this. So with Transportation 2050, you, the council, our community already said they wanted extended hours for bus service. They wanted better bus service. And in a couple of very short weeks, we're going to make that first step, and so excited. Want to make sure that all of you are aware that on October 24th, we will be extending our bus hours 3 hours every day, so an hour earlier, 2 hours later every single day. And no bus will operate more than 30 minutes between another bus coming. Significant achievements, but it's the first step. And so we're going to talk about step 2, which will be coming in April of 2017. Gentlemen, Joe Bauer, Acting Deputy Director, is joining us, along with Jesus.
Good morning, members of the subcommittee. As Maria said, in 13 days, we start the first step of expanded hours of operation for our bus service. We broke this into 2 steps. So in April of 17, we are proposing to add 2 more hours of operation on Friday, 4 more hours on Saturday, 1 more hour on Sunday. And obviously the goal was to match light rail hours. So this would complete, in April, we'll complete the second phase or step and get to matching light rail hours through all our bus routes. So there's connectivity. Baseball game gets out late, any event downtown, you can use the bus and the rail to your advantage. And we had just started our public input process. So this is notifying the subcommittee that we have initiated the public input process. It started October 3rd. It'll go through November 4th. In addition to the expanded hours of operation, we are proposing changes to 3 fixed local routes. The first route is Route 39, which is on 40th Street from Shea Boulevard up to the community college in Union Hills. This route is one of our lower performing routes, so we're looking to take steps to enhance the ridership, to improve it now that we have a little more funding to help these routes. And we're proposing 2 options. The options involve how it gets to the Paradise Valley Mall. So we want to provide connectivity to the mall. A common feature of both options is to take the route when it hits 40th Street and Shea and run it over to our Dreamy Draw Park and Ride at 32nd and Shea or the SR 51. The second option, it's a matter of the routing of the bus to go to the mall. So we cover a little more area on the second option. There's also Route 138 that serves that same area, but it provides possibly a little more frequency for those people. So it's a routing option, and obviously there's a cost differential between those 2. So we're hoping for a lot of public input to help us make that decision. We also have a proposed change to Route 70, and this would be on the 24th Street reach of Route 70. Route 70 also goes on Glendale Avenue from Luke Air Force Base all the way down to South Mountain Avenue and 24th Street. This segment, we have a park and ride that was opened up 3 years ago now, I believe. And we want to eliminate the last half mile of this route that goes from Baseline down to South Mountain Avenue. We've had a neighborhood that does not like the bus traveling in that area at South Mountain Avenue and 24th Street. So they reached out to us, and we are soliciting public input on the elimination of that segment. It's a low ridership segment. We get about 8 boardings per weekday in that half-mile reach. So it's something we want to get the input from the area to help us determine whether we want to eliminate that segment. And we also have a proposed change to Route 122, which is Cactus Road. And again, this is another route that has been an underperformer. It suffered dearly during the recession. The city of Glendale eliminated a few miles of Cactus Road service during the recession. We had trimmed it back. October 24th for this route, it goes from 60-minute weekday frequency to 30-minute weekday frequency. It's going to see 30-minute frequency on the weekends starting in 13 days, so that's a very positive change. But I think we're proposing to this route is a win-win. First, we want to extend the route up 51st Avenue to hit the ASU West campus, so there's connectivity on that route, and then complete that by extending the route from 19th and Cactus down to the light rail at 19th Avenue and Dunlap. So people can get off rail and have a one-seat ride all the way to the ASU West campus, or vice versa. They get back down the rail, so it saves a transfer. We feel this is a very positive change. It'll help the 122 grow. And we're again soliciting public input on that. So this is our process. We're here today to get, for information and discussion with the subcommittee on our proposed changes. The public input process ends November 4th. There's a public hearing November 1st. We'll go back through the Citizens Transportation Commission in November, and then we'll come back to you in the subcommittee to give you the results of the public input and try to finalize our changes for April. These changes would become effective April 24th of 17.
Have questions? I have a question on the Cactus route that you're changing. Are you planning to have some type of public meeting at ASU West?
What we are doing right now is we are putting up signs on every bus stop on Cactus so that we can let the riders know that this is going to expand, and then we'll go out and do targeted research. We'll go up to ASU West campus. The 138 and there's two routes that go there, right? I can't, pardon me, the other route escapes me for the second, but it's the 138, and so we'll go at that stop on campus and get out flyers to them, and they'll get signs posted on their bus stops too to let them know of this.
And you would put something at the light rail stations?
Yes.
Saying that this is being considered. I'm most curious to see what the results are because ASU runs those buses. And they are usually, I think they're free to the students, heavily traveled. I see them all the time. They run on a regular basis. I'm curious to see if we are really a competitor in those and people want to pay to join and go this route and join the light rail, or if, I don't know if we've had conversations, if this is an option and ASU knows about this could be potential, because that has to be extremely expensive operation they're doing.
Madam Chair, we've had several years' worth of discussions with ASU regarding their shuttle system, and we will continue those discussions. I think what you would see in this instance is the student who lives somewhere between downtown or Tempe and ASU West, who finds it an easier option to then get on the light rail and then make this connection. The shuttle doesn't make any stops between downtown Phoenix and ASU West. So this is really, I think in the interim, this is that option that provides the halfway or somewhere in between option for the students. But we are still committed to continuing those discussions with ASU. I would love to see the shuttles gone completely and being able to provide a better option so that we're seeing them on our transportation system versus those. But I think it's going to be a discussion that will take maybe a couple of years longer.
And they're pretty fancy buses.
They're really nice.
Yeah.
And I'm going to lead to that because I would like to know as a student what the drive time, how many minutes would I be sitting on a shuttle versus a light rail?
And Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, we do actually have that data and can get back to you with it. I don't have it in my head, but we do have it.
Just curious because I would think being on a shuttle would be faster. Then I agree with you on the in-between time or the in-between routes where there's an alternative or a park and ride, but I would think that the shuttle would be faster, but I don't know. So that's the curious. I'm curious about knowing the time.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Pastor, be happy to
you.
get back with you on that.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Very excited about, first off, the South Central News and the great support we're getting from our federal government partners. I think it's attention that's well-deserved, that our program is so in line with their Ladders of Opportunity agenda to connect students with schools and employees with good jobs. And the same will be true as we expand these hours. We've heard over and over from employers that shift work is becoming an increasingly important part of our economy, especially as we try to diversify our economy and make more things in the Phoenix market. And I have a lot of employers in areas around the airport, Broadway corridor, and others who say, we really need people to be able to get to and from work at all hours of day. Councilwoman Pastor and I work on My Brother's Keeper together, and we just had a job fair for returning citizens, people who have been in the criminal justice system. And one of the biggest impediments for matching people with jobs was transportation, that many of those individuals didn't have a single-family car and use the bus system, and the hours don't line up perfectly with the old hours, but much better with the hours starting October 24th, and then I can only assume that come April, it'll be even better. So this is great news for job seekers and for employers, and I hope, we heard a lot from employers that they wanted to see this happen, so well, hopefully they will get the word that we're following through and that we can do a robust effort to reach out to those employers who might be able to now hire people who didn't match before. So great news in that area. And speaking of My Brother's Keeper, it's been wonderful to see the bus operators, particularly TransDev, partner with us on My Brother's Keeper to try to hire operators and other employees who are targeting the groups we're working with through My Brother's Keeper, whether it be disconnected youth or returning citizens. So great news in that area, and I'm glad to see that partnership. On a more detail level question, when we eliminate part of a route and we have 8 riders who use it, we reach them with signs, or how do we let them know so that they can engage?
So, Chair Williams and Councilwoman Gallego, we have, in that reach, there are 2 bus stops. Well, there's 3 bus stops. One's right at Baseline. There are 2 bus stops in that reach. We put A-frames out at the stop, so they're in Spanish, English, so they can all see who to contact or get advance notice of those changes.
And so the people can either attend a meeting or write to us? Are those the
Right.
2 best ways
Yes.
to engage?
And I can tell you, in the first week of public comment, we did get a couple comments in regard to that particular route already. Both were in favor, but I mean, that, we obviously want input from those 8 riders, right? So we hope that this will engage them. Those signs have been up for a week now, so we hope to get input from them.
Wonderful. And at the same time, our streets department is looking at a CIP project to address one of the traffic issues in that area. So we can all perhaps coordinate on that if we're eliminating the route. That might change the priority level for the CIP project to accommodate buses.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, one of the other things is that these are proposed changes, so we will take that public input, and if we don't end up eliminating that tail end of Route 70, we may simply just reroute it. One of the issues that we're working with, as Joe mentioned, is some of the local neighborhood opposition that simply don't want a bus traveling through their neighborhood. And one of the issues there is that some individuals on 24th Street have open-faced backyards that are right up against 24th Street. So they're trying to minimize the noise and the vehicles passing by. So we understand that. The other thing is, as you are aware in that area, some of those streets are a little narrow. And when we get to the end of the line, we have to turn the bus around. So one of the things that we're looking for in terms of public input is options. If we don't end up eliminating it because there are people who use it, then we may simply reroute that end of the Route 70 and come up with other solutions. What we're looking right now is to seek that input and to make sure we get that input before we make any changes.
And there's no doubt it has a real impact on people, and they have real feedback about that. we've had all sorts of creative solutions, from street changes to you should have electric buses on this particular route. So we have very creative constituents in Phoenix, and I think we'll come to a good solution, but we'll probably have to explore a few options. Thank you.
I think it's interesting that you simply say we're going to extend 2 hours and 2 hours, and that sounds so simple. And then I found out how many extra bus drivers I mean, when you talk about employment opportunities, they are still hiring, and now they're hiring in anticipation of this. The training programs that are required, it is not a simple process to just extend hours. I am very impressed with what the company has done in their hiring practices and how you have worked with them to make this all possible in such a timely manner. So thank you for all your hard work on this.
And Madam Chair, the last thing I would note on that is that those are local permanent jobs. Those are jobs that are going to be around for a while. They're operators, fuelers, cleaners, road supervision. It's a mixed bag basically, but those are all local that are going to be here a long time.
Be here a long time, so I'm hope anybody happens to see this that knows somebody that's unemployed that is interested in driving or having anything to do with this, gets them right down and gets an app in. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for my birthday gift on the 24th, extended hours. I'll make sure I'm out
Okay.
extending.
When we can't find you, look on a bus.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
We will go to item 12, which is the Parks Turf Compost Study. It's a pretty dirty subject, right?
It's an interesting subject for us. You know, we like talking trash, so
I know.
it's one of our favorite things to do. So,
Fingers.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I have Deputy Director Chuck Hamstra here with me today, as well as Director Inger Erickson. I also like to recognize a couple of staff who worked on this project, and I have Stacy Hetzmedberger from Public Works, as well as Larry Polk from Parks, as well, has been very instrumental in moving this project forward. So we want to talk to you about a project that started last year, and it's really was started off based on the garbage study that we did with the City of Phoenix, and we found that 50% of what our residents throw away is compostable material. And so earlier today, you just approved a contract for hiring a company to start the composting program. So we're investing in the infrastructure to start that process. So 50% is about 185,000 tons of material that we take to the landfill that we want to stop and do something with it. And we would like to take that material and use it as a resource to invest in our infrastructure and invest into parks, turf, and to make it more viable versus the inorganic process that's being used at this time. And so we decided to come up and fund a study through our Resource Innovation and Solutions Network in partnership with Arizona State University to find out the positive impacts that organic compost would have on our parks turf. And so we are going through a 3-year study as part of this process. Doesn't work. There we go. As part of this process to go through that. And so Parks has been a very good partner with us and working through this process. And we've chosen several parks. But what's interesting about this process is, go ahead, next slide. We've been talking about their circular economy. So again, we're working through this circular process to take this material and use it as a resource and invest in our natural capital, as we call it, to make it a more viable structure moving forward. And so as part of this process, we decided to, again, working with Parks on a process to what better way than to take this material and use it on a city program. And so as part of this process, again, we're going to produce up to 55,000 tons of compost in the first few years as part of our program. And we need to find a viable market for that material as well. And so between Parks, Public Works, and ASU, we're working on this 3-year process moving forward. And I'm going to have Chuck Hamstra talk a little bit about this process. Next slide.
Good morning, Madam Chair and council members. Thank you, Inger. Good morning, Madam Chair and council members. The compost study actually has 4 different parks that we selected as part of the study. There are 1 acre parcels where we're actually looking at the turf at those parks, and the parks are Smith, Toronto, Paradise Valley, and Encanto. We also did a number of demonstration projects. We chose 2 dog parks to do demonstration projects at Cesar Chavez and Hans Park, and then also demonstration projects right downtown at the Cesar Chavez Plaza, Calvin Good Plaza, and the Employee Memorial Plaza. And you may have seen some of our compost on the actual turf downtown. So what we did when we selected those parks was they were selected based on soil type and watering use at those parks, as well as we wanted to make sure that we were looking at the multi-use turf, not the specialty turf, and that the turf was being used similarly on the control sections as well as the study sections. And it is regular standard Bermuda grass that's used on that turf. So in looking at the study design, what we looked at was we're partnering with ASU on the actual science. So we're wanting to look at how the soil structure improves with the application of compost. So we're looking at the soil structure for the physical soil structure. Can we improve the moisture retention in that soil? We're looking at the chemical structure. Can we improve the nutrition to the turf? And then biologically, can we increase the microorganisms in the turf to improve the diversity there and help the microclimates there for the turf? So the whole concept is to get increased turf appearance and durability and health on the turf for that. So you can see right there in the slides before you can see one of the parks that we chose. We actually did at Smith Park, we actually did 2 different test sites where we do 1 application and a second application. So next slide, please. Then the compost process, what we did, thank you. Compost process, what we did was we actually used the compost coming from our pilot study at the 27th Avenue transfer station. So at that was a facility that was built as part of the Super Bowl to take the food scraps and the compostables from the Super Bowl and repurpose them and avoid sending them to the landfill. We also have continued to operate that facility to continue to study how to produce that kind of material from the scraps that are coming from different city events. We also brought the scraps from the college national football championship, and we're planning on the Final Four materials coming to that facility as well. We also do food scraps that we divert from the transfer stations as they come in from different private haulers and specialty providers that bring food scraps in and incorporate that into our compost process. So the facility there has a limited capability. So right now, all the materials that are being produced out of that facility are being used as part of this compost turf study. So it's a pretty exciting study for us. So 1-year accomplishments. The study is designed to be a 3-year study. We are into the first year of the study. Because it is a turf study, we are studying an agrarian application. It takes a little while to get the data. ASU has taken multiple samples. We have a good baseline established in this first year. We're looking forward to the next couple years to be getting more data as we move forward. We've recognized now the value in supporting our diversion programs through this circular economy of accepting the materials from our parks, putting them through our composting facility, producing a product that can be beneficial to the parks, and returning those back to the parks. So as John mentioned earlier, we have used about 450 cubic yards of material already through the process. So we're excited about what the future holds. In wrapping it up, just want to leave you with two ideas on our project. Is it has generated amongst our staff level of excitement. You would think that managing turf isn't too excitement. Maybe it is for the Parks Department.
disagree.
Yes. But it has developed a level of excitement among both of our staff. They're very excited about the project, and it has fostered a spirit of cooperation among our staff as well. So they're very much looking forward to the second year of the study. And then secondly and lastly, it is diverting material away from our landfill and helping us achieve our goals and putting that material back into the economy for beneficial use. Thank you.
Any questions?
Inger, how do you feel about it?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, it's a great opportunity for us to partner and really take something that was, obviously going to fill up the landfill and return it. And, the closer the product is to what we actually have as organic, I think it's going to show good results in the end. Like I said, it's too early to know the results, but anytime that we can work together to provide a better product for our turf. There are many people in our department who think turf is the thing. So we really appreciate the opportunity to receive back the compost.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you very much. We'll look forward to next year.
All right.
Brings us to call to the public, Cynthia Malecki, but I think she left. Craig Weaver.
Yes, good morning. I hope I'm not the last thing, but I feel like I am, so I'm going to be short and sweet. It's always good to learn something new, and last week I learned something new about LEDs. The reason I handed out a picture of an owl that's on the cover of this sheet is because a couple of weeks ago, the group called the Liberty Wildlife had recovered these babies and released them in the preserve at North Mountain. The reason I'm mentioning that is because with the development of new LEDs for our neighborhoods, our streets, and our parks, we've come to realize that the blue spike, which is on page 2, is unique to LED light fixtures. However, a week ago, I learned that there's a company that has developed a filter for LED fixtures that take out all of the blue light. And the Parks Department director has agreed to test one of these in Mountain View Park, where that test site is. The reason I'm here talking to Street Department is because there's a growing concern about how the preserves will be preserved in the future with these new lights. And we'd like to see if we can work with the Street Department in creating a couple of neighborhood areas next to the preserves where these this new technology is installed. The neighbors in my neighborhood have all agreed to energy efficient LEDs as long as they're just like the high pressure sodium that they've always had there in our neighborhood that borders the mountain preserve. I think that the new fixture that has been developed in Paradise Valley is built in Tempe and has been sold 30,000 of them to Hawaii is something that's worth taking a second look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. Haley?
Good afternoon, council people. It's good to see you again. I just want to thank you for your support of the extended hours and the Valley Metro plans, and I'm excited and I'm looking forward to public input comment sessions. I noticed there was one on November 1st. There was a public hearing for the Cactus Route 122. I use all of these routes on a regular basis randomly because my schedule is so kind of crazy. So I depend on all these routes on and off throughout the year, and I really appreciate what Valley Metro is doing to extend those hours, because it's important that, sometimes I have night shifts where I work at Amazon, where I'm interpreting for deaf folks that work there, and it's exciting to see those changes happen, and I'm looking forward to those extended hours. So thank you very much for being as enthusiastic and excited about it as I am. And then, so like I said, I just want to hear more about the public hearing sessions that are happening for the Cactus Route 122 and the Glendale Route 70. So maybe I can find out more after the meeting. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm sure Maria will be glad to tell you all about them. Thank you very much. Do we have any more public that wishes to speak? None? Any future agenda items? Our next agenda is pretty full, so in that case, we are adjourned.